and the man himself?
Well, in the 40s, I saw the American films of Jean Renoir. The first one was The Southerner, and then eventually I saw Diary of a Chambermaid and a few other things. And then I had read about his French work, and I was familiar with his father's paintings. And then Renoir, in 49, I think, he came to Calcutta to look for locations for the river. I was an advertising man at that time, and it so happened that the agency where I worked was quite near the hotel where he was staying. So I just went and presented myself as a student of the cinema. And I got to know him quite well because he was comparatively free at that time in the evenings, and I would often sort of drop in. And later in 1950, well, he went back to Hollywood and then came back again in the 50s to start shooting. But I'm afraid I was not in a position to watch him work because I had my job. I went on a Sunday or maybe a couple of Sundays to watch him, and then I left for England. And it was in England that I first saw Renoir's French films, La Règle de Jeu and Partie du Campagne and all the rest of them. And even before I had seen them, I had discussed them with him, I had put questions to him about his various films, La Bête Humaine, and so that was very, very important for me. The talks that I had with him, even before I had seen his French films, that was very, very important.
There's one social comment that you make in all the films that I've seen that you've done, and I'm wondering if it has any effect on the Indian people and what kind of effect, if it does. And that is the vision of the wife or woman as servant. Is anything happening in India right now as far as that cultural tradition?
Well, obviously a lot has happened. There's a tremendous lot of emancipation, and part of that is the theme of Mahanagar, the big city, which is my middle 60s film. The film deals entirely with that aspect. A wife who would normally be just a housewife suddenly is faced with a situation where she has to go out and find a job to support her husband's income because they are not earning. I mean, they have to, just make both ends meet. And she gets a job as a sales girl. The in-laws are terribly upset that their daughter-in-law should go out and, do that. But she becomes a success in her work and begins to earn more than the husband. And there's this psychological conflict between the two. And finally, the husband loses his job, etc. I mean, it's that thing, which is very much the kind of theme that you're...
Right. Do you think the big city was very instrumental in promoting this kind of change?
I don't think a film does that, really. As a matter of fact, I must refer to a remark. Renoir was asked the same question. How much do you think, what kind of influence do you think has a film has on society? And he mentioned the instance of La Grande Illusion, which was made 1 year before the Second World War started. It was an anti-war statement, very powerful, but it didn't prevent the war.
Mr. Ray, what way how carefully do you pre-plan your film before you're going to make it, or your films? When do you illustrate them very, very accurately? Or
Yeah, I do that. I mean, that's been my practice right from the... Well, the first film had no proper script because the film was made while I still had my advertising job, and it was all in my head. It was shot on weekends, frankly speaking, over a period of 2 years. 2 years because for long stretches we had no money. That's why it took so long. And in fact, the film was shelved several times, and everybody was told that, no, that's all. We can't... But later on, I had to be very economical. And if you want to be economical, you have to be disciplined. You have to pre-plan to a considerable extent. And so everything is very carefully planned in my films. My shooting ratio, incidentally, is 4:1. It's been that all the way through. I rarely exceed it. And, well, there is room left for improvisation, particularly if you're shooting on location. You get ideas. A certain change of climate, you have some wind rises or clouds come and you have to do new things which are not in the script, and you find new camera angles all the time. But shooting in the studio, confined within the 3 or 4 walls of the set, you have to be very, very careful. And in any case, we couldn't afford to be wasteful in the circumstances which we were. I operate my own camera now. I've been doing so for the last 15 years. Not that I have no trust in my cameraman's operational abilities, but I feel that ever since we've been using an Arriflex, that is the best position to judge the acting from, is through the lens. And also, I notice that working with non-professionals, they are happier if they don't see my face while I'm directing. I'm not sort of staring at them like that, and, you know. So they are happier, they feel more relaxed. And I enjoy operating, but I have a lighting cameraman. And of course, nothing, it's all done through discussions. And now I'm using a second cameraman. I started with one cameraman, Subrata Mitra, who was a beginner at that time. He was 21 when he shot the first film. Never handled a movie camera in his life. But I had to have a new cameraman because all the professionals said that you can't shoot in rain and you can't shoot outdoors, the light keeps changing, the sun goes down too fast, etc. So I had to have a new cameraman, and we decided on certain basic things. We were great admirers, both of us were great admirers of Cartier-Bresson, and we believed in available light. And we aimed at simulating available light in the studio by using bounce lights. And this is interesting because, well, this didn't happen with the first film, but with the second film, when we had to shoot interiors in the studio, supposedly houses in Benares, where there was a central courtyard with no roof on top, and the light all came from the sky, and it was a kind of top lighting, shadowless, that we started using bounce lighting with cloth stretched over, and the lights bounced back from those. And we had also had boards, framed white pieces of white cloth, large, enormous things, and bounced back from that. Except for night scenes where there is a source of light established, and you follow that source as much as possible. If it's candle, if it's lantern, if it's electric light, you follow the source. It simplifies things, you know. And later, well, I think about 7 or 8 years after that, I read an article in the American Cinematographer written by Sven Nykvist, saying, this was at the time of Through a Glass Darkly, I think, that they had invented bounce lighting. But we've been doing it ever since 1953, 54. So there's a great deal of discussion between the cameraman and myself, but I compose my images and I operate them. There's a focus puller, of course, and there's a lighting cameraman. And everything is decided beforehand. With a color film, all the color schemes, every piece of costume, I go out myself to buy the material. And my scripts are all in visual forms. They're not sort of written documents which can be duplicated and handed out to the various members of the crew. They're just little sketches, frame sketches with directions down on the right-hand side and little notes on dialogue and camera movements. Because I don't think it's a literary medium anyway. Why waste words? Why try? Because if it's only when the question of publication comes that you have to devise a kind of part novel, part drama form.
How has censorship affected your films?
Not to any serious extent. There was, because I have more or less been oblique in my statements, even on human relationship. We can't afford to be too permissive, you know. In any case, we know we cannot, and I'm not particularly anxious to be too permissive, because I think that there has to be some room left for suggestion and obliqueness. But there is, I believe, a strong political censorship. There is a censorship of violence. I mean, there's a lot of fighting in the new commercial cinema, but there's no blood shown. Apparently, you're free. You're free to show a lot of bashing about, but if you show ketchup, then you're in for it.
What are some of the current favorites in India right now from American films? Current, not history.
Well, Godfather had a tremendous success. I'm sure Star Wars is going to be a tremendous success. Jaws will be a tremendous. Exorcist is playing in Calcutta now for the last 3 months when I left. Well, it's the same as here. So it's a kind of standard sort of rubber stamp reaction.
Censorship rules not apply to those films?
The present Board of Censor seems to be very lenient as far as foreign films go. We've had One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was shown with very few cuts. I saw it in somewhere abroad, and then I saw it in Calcutta again. I noticed very, very few cuts. So the present group of censors, it always depends on the individuals who comprise the board. And if they are sensible people with some understanding of film art, they will be lenient when they see an important work of art.